Ali, thank you for talking to me. Before I ask about your own involvement in marriage equality, could you tell me about why marriage equality is such an important issue to you?
I think it's really important because while there's something that allows one section of society to get married and another not to be allowed to get married, that we'll always continue to see discrimination, and I think it backs up homophobic ideas. So I think ultimately we want to see everybody being equal in the eyes of the law.
How did you get involved in the campaign for marriage equality?
Well, I was the queer officer at my university in 2004, and we received an email saying that there was going to be a snap protest on the day that they changed the Marriage Act, and we were invited to encourage our student activists to come along, so I grabbed as many people that I could find that supported marriage equality at the time to come out and march on the state parliament in Melbourne to protest against the ban on same-sex marriage at the time. So it was quite a small rally, but that's how it all got started.
You've been involved with the Equal Love campaign. Can you tell us a bit about the history of Equal Love?
Yeah, so Equal Love formed in 2004 in response to the banning of the Marriage Act, or the changing of the wording of the Marriage Act. And we were initially a part of the Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby, and we stayed as a part of the Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby for a few years until we realised that it didn't really fit. We were more of an activist organisation organising protests on the streets, and where they are more of a lobby group, so we had different interests, so we decided to part.
Why do you think Australian politicians have been so slow to come on board with marriage equality?
I think that I think there's a mixture of things. I think there's a lot of pressure from a lot of the conservative sections of society and within their parties. And the major parties in Australia get a lot of funding from some of those conservative bodies. And so I think that means that to appease those important funding bodies, they try to maintain the status quo. But I also think that the politicians are a lot more conservative than the majority of Australians.
Why do you think polls now consistently show that the majority of Australians do support marriage equality compared to previous years?
Well, a big part of it is that the campaign has just been going on for so long. Every year there's protests on the streets. We see Australian Marriage Equality are doing a lot of lobbying of politicians. So no politician can be interviewed on television, especially in the lead up to election time, without being asked questions about marriage equality. And so that constant public pressure has moved Australian society massively in favour of marriage equality. In 2004, we didn't see a majority of Australians support marriage equality, and now we're in a majority. And even at one point, no politicians said they supported it, and now we see quite a few. The Labor Party's changed their formal position, and we also see many people in the Liberal Party saying that they support marriage equality. So we've come quite far, but we're just not there yet.
And do you think members of the ALP and the Liberal Party have come out in support of marriage equality because they know the public in general does support it, and they have that public support of their electorate?
I think that's a big part of it, but for quite some time it had been the case that the majority of Australians supported marriage equality, and even the Labor Party hadn't changed their formal position. So I don't think it's just that. I think the pressure from the Conservatives is still something that's quite real for politicians. So, but I think that it's just becoming more and more of a headache for them and it was looking ridiculous, particularly with a lot of the LGBT members of the Labor Party themselves saying that they don't support it because they had to toe the party line. So it was becoming more and more ridiculous that I think that they had to allow some of their MPs, or particularly Penny Wong at the time. It was looking ridiculous that she was in a same-sex relationship and had to keep coming out towing the party line. So I think that some of those things, it just kind of became more and more pressure on them to be able to say what they actually think.
Did you sympathise with her at the time, or did you feel frustration?
I was very frustrated. I found it outrageous. And we also had Australia's first female Prime Minister who was in a de facto relationship with a man, but she wasn't married herself, but she was seen as somebody who was a bit more liberal than some of the other politicians that we'd seen. But I think that she proved that she was just as hardened as the rest of them. And that whilst it gave a lot of people a lot of hope, a lot of people were quite disappointed.
Of course, in recent months, Julia Gillard has come out in support of marriage equality. How do you feel about her coming out in support of it now when she's no longer in power or has that influence? Do you welcome her support? Do you feel a bit cynical? Again, do you feel frustrated?
Well, I'd say I cynically welcome her support. I think when anybody comes out in support, I think that it's a good thing. But I think that sometimes it's too little too late. So I think it's a bit gutless to not, like, when you have that power, I think sometimes you need to kind of bite the bullet a bit and accept that you need to get with the times. Like, the majority of Australians support it, so you need to step up to the table.
We've talked about the polls before, and we've talked about what the majority of Australians think. Of course, there's a big vote that's proposed, the plebiscite. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think by the looks of it, the plebiscite looks like it's just going to be another opinion poll. So I have faith in the majority of Australians that they would vote in favour of changing the Marriage Act back to, or taking those words out to say that it's taking the words out that it's a marriage between solely an institution between a man and a woman. But we've seen poll after poll prove this. It's not a non-binding plebiscite, so it's, to me, it just seems like another time waster, another thing to drag the issue out even more when they can just put a bill and pass it.
Do you think the plebiscite and the debates that will surround it could be damaging, particularly to people who identify as LGBTQI?
I'm less worried about this than I know this is a major concern for a lot of people, and there are some people within the Equal Love Committee that are really concerned about this, but I feel like we have largely won this campaign when it comes to the majority of people. And because our campaign has been, it's coming on to 12 years that we've been fighting around this, and most of, like, this is one of the longest campaigns for marriage equality in the world that we have in Australia. And we've seen so many people change their positions, including people that were quite conservative on the issue, so including Liberal politicians, Labor politicians, and right-wing shock jocks that you would never expect to change their position on marriage equality now. They can't get away with saying that they don't support it anymore. So some of these people you would imagine being some of the people that would whip up the homophobia around a plebiscite. But because we've already moved a lot of those people, I think that the ideas that come out of the Australian Christian lobby, which I think will be some of the most damaging, I think that we are capable of countering a lot of the bullying that comes from some of these organisations.
How do you feel about groups like the Australian Christian lobby?
I think they're really dangerous, and I think they're awful, and I'm quite disgusted a lot of the time that they get so much airtime and attention. I think that the fact that politicians speak at their events, I think it's madness, honestly. But I think that they're very determined, and they're clearly able to raise a lot of funds. They are really good at spreading fear amongst religious groups, and it's interesting that they rarely actually talk about marriage. They want to go on about how it's going to affect children. So you can see that their tactics are all about enraging fear in people, and I think that it's really important that we don't let their ideas go unchallenged.
Do you think marriage equality in Australia is inevitable?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think it's really important that we keep up the fight. I know that most people think that it's inevitable because it's happening all around us, but Australian politicians are also proving that they are some of the most hardened in changing things to be more progressive in Australia. So I think that without a fight, I don't think it's something that we can just expect to happen. So I think we need to maintain the pressure and keep up the campaigns and try to counter some of the things that we hear from people, that there are more important issues to deal with. Because honestly, how hard is it to put a bill and vote on it and have it passed and then at the same time deal with all of these other issues?
Do you think there's any chance that Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull could change his mind on the plebiscite?
I hope so, and I think we should continue to put that pressure on him. It's already looking like it's very unpopular because of the amount of money that it's going to cost, and with people's fears that it's going to whip up a lot of homophobia and discrimination so publicly. So I think that it's important that we keep up that pressure, but we can only put more pressure on him and hope that he does change his position.
If it went to a vote in Parliament, would you support a binding vote or a conscience vote?
Well, I think it depends. The Labor Party's formal position is to say that they support marriage equality. So on all other issues, the Labor Party vote in accordance to their party position, except for this issue. And so I think they should have a binding vote according to their party position. Unless the Liberal Party changed their party position to say they support marriage equality, I'm for them having a free vote, so that the members that do support marriage equality are allowed to vote in favour. And if they don't have a free vote, I'm for those that do support marriage equality crossing the floor and defying their party line so we can see equality in Australia.
What do you think the timeline for marriage equality in Australia is?
That's really hard to say. A lot of it has to do with who wins the next election. It's looking like the Liberal Party are quite firmly going to win the election. And a lot of it also depends on how much pressure Turnbull is put under by the more conservative people within his party. And I think with him taking over the reins from Abbott, he had to please a lot of the conservatives within the party. And I think that is partly why he is going along with Abbott's idea of the plebiscite. Abbott only suggested having a plebiscite, and Turnbull's the one that actually put it, is saying that he's the one that wants to make it a reality. And he initially opposed the plebiscite when Abbott raised it. So the interesting thing there is, I think that shows that he had made promises to some of the more conservative people in order for them to let him take the reins, that he would appease them in some way and go along with some of those more conservative ideas.
How do you convince those who oppose marriage equality on the grounds of tradition, culture or religion?
I think that why shouldn't same-sex couples or any two consenting adults be denied those same freedoms? A lot of, whether you're religious or not, I think that you shouldn't deny other people their right to have be a part of those traditions. And nobody's given me any reasons to say that same-sex couples, people use examples from the Bible, but from the examples that people give, it just seems like it's a particular reading of a man shall not lay next to another man, or whatever the line is. That could be interpreted in all sorts of ways, and there's no reference to marriage of what gender people should be in relation to marriage.
What do you say to those people, including those who identify as LGBTQI, who are either in opposition to or are sceptical of marriage equality on the grounds that it's patriarchal, it's a heterosexual institution, we're aping heterosexuals, or many other similar reasons?
Yeah, well, my response to that is no one's forcing you to get married, and I myself don't have an interest in getting married, but I want to be able to make that choice. I don't want the government making that choice for me. So if you want to reject the idea of marriage, then just don't get married. But why should you support the state denying other people their right to? And I think I also don't see it as just an issue of marriage. I think having a law that discriminates, I think, is really dangerous and sends a really bad message to young people who are coming to terms with their sexuality, that it just backs up like a lot of people's ideas that it's that you are somehow less deserving and different from your heterosexual brothers and sisters or counterparts.
And finally, on the subject of opposition to marriage equality, what do you say to those who have concerns that the campaign for marriage equality almost stigmatises those same-sex couples, and even to an extent opposite-sex couples, who wish to be together but not marry?
I think that, well, I think a lot of those things will probably go away once we do win marriage equality. I am not shy about saying that I don't want to get married, and at our rallies we do talk about the importance of letting people that want to get married get married. There's a couple within our Equal Love Committee that have been together for coming on 28 years. We see stories of elderly people dying before they've had the opportunity to marry the ones that they love. I think, how could you want to deny them their right? But just because these people exist, it doesn't in any way stop you from being able to express your opinions on why you want to reject marriage. And I think that it's important to, and I think the arguments that I made before about the broader implications of denying people their rights is a really important arguments to make, so people see that it goes beyond just the issue of marriage.
Equal Love has been involved with many of the rallies, and sometimes there's concern with some of the groups at the rallies that a lot of profanities are used or abusive language. What do you think the best method of campaigning is?
I think just being as, well, for the rallies to be big, I think are really important, and to include a really diverse range of people. The demographic of the rallies they're younger and younger every time, which people think that it's a bit weird because a lot of these young people don't have an interest in getting married yet, but they're some of the most outraged by it because they see the politicians as being like really backward. They don't understand how this backwards law is still in place in Australia. So I think having that demographic is really important. I think that including as many people as possible is so important, because with every civil rights movement in history, it means so much to people to feel like they're a part of that change. I don't know if we use as many profanities as some people like to make out, but I think that's a bit by the by. When people, it's understandable that people are angry, and we've been fighting for nearly 12 years, and if people are angry at the politicians and every now and then slip out a bad word, I think that that is nothing compared to the discrimination that people face in their day-to-day lives.
What advice, if you could give any, would you give to the existing campaigns?
I think that for people to keep their hopes up, and I think that just because we haven't won yet, I think it's important to look at the gains that we have made. Like, we obviously have seen the majority of Australians change their position. We've seen more and more politicians change their position. All around the world, people, countries are changing their marriage acts to support marriage equality. And I think we need to take inspiration from those people. The footage you see from countries like the US and Ireland when they change their position, just the looks on people's faces, you can tell that it's going to change people's lives for the better. And I think that is something that we have to keep in our hearts, and a day that we've got to look forward to.
Does the campaign for LGBTQI rights end with marriage equality?
Not at all. I think that some of the things that the marriage equality campaign has highlighted is that there's still quite some way to go. We've just seen adoption rights granted for same-sex couples in Victoria, which I think is fantastic. There's a lot of issues around intersex people's rights, trans rights, and particularly in relation to marriage, but also more broader than that. And so it's one of the things that we also like to highlight at some of our rallies. So we get speakers from all sections of the community to also try to highlight some of the other issues that the LGBTI community face.
What do you say to people who have some concerns that marriage equality has overshadowed many of those other rainbow issues?
I think that it is a very popular issue, but it's only just become a popular issue from our campaign. So I think that there's a lot that people could probably learn from the marriage equality campaign to organise public demonstrations, to send out constant press releases and try to make it an issue that is highlighted so frequently. We started out only having one rally a year, and then we felt like that wasn't enough. So we have several rallies every year throughout the year. We have a contingent in the Pride March that we try to make it a really lively, and we try to encourage active involvement from our supporters. And I think some of these things are really important in keeping the issue alive and really highlighting the issue. So I would encourage other people that feel like this issue is overshadowing whatever they are campaigning around to take on some of the things that we have done to make it as successful as it is.
Some of the people I've met at the marriage equality rallies have never been to other rallies in their lives.
Yeah.
In fact, many of them have never been directly involved with politics. Rather than take away from other issues, do you think it's perhaps enlivened politics? It's actually mobilised people. It's motivated them to get involved.
Yeah, I think so. I have spoken to people that work with, I don't know if you've heard of the Safe Schools Coalition, but a lot of the young people that are involved in some of the things that they do, they have their first involvement in doing any type of activism around LGBTI rights has been, their first thing was going to a marriage equality campaign. And so many of these young people now run queer straight alliances at their schools and then go on to being queer activists on their campuses. And so I think that it's meant that there's a whole new breed of activists, you could say, that are now there to continue the fight for whatever comes next.
Couple more questions. What advice do you give to those who are wavering on the issue?
I think to see the issue as not being to do with you is really important. That I think to hear the stories from people that it affects, whether it is people that are directly affected in that they've been denied their rights, but also looking at stories of how it makes young people feel is really important. A lot of those stories are like they pull at your heartstrings, and you've got to be a pretty soulless person to be able to hear those stories and not feel like you should still continue denying these people their rights. I think those things are really important.
How can people who support marriage equality get more involved?
Well, we are always looking for more volunteers, so I think people should look up the Equal Love website or our Facebook. In Melbourne we have a LGBTI festival over summer called Midsummer, and we'll be organising a lot of events around that. So we are having a stall at the Midsummer Carnival where people will not just be looking for people to volunteer to help us out on the day, but also we're encouraging people to come and if they want to get married, be it illegal, so to speak, we're going to be having a celebrant and things like that at the carnival, and we'll also be having a contingent in the Pride March that we're encouraging everybody to be involved in.
And finally, what are your hopes for the future?
I hope we get this bill put and passed as soon as possible. I think that there'll be a lot of weddings to go to in the future, but I think that it's an outrage that Australia's taken this long, and I think that we need to get it done, and we need to get it done quickly.
Ali, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.